This is the Plant Yourself Podcast. I'm Howard Jacobson of PlantYourself.com and WellStartHealth.com and WellStartCoach.com. This podcast is part of my mission to help you live a passion and purpose-driven life. Today, we are talking with Kevin Davis. Kevin is a plant-based coach and anxiety coach. He has his own story of being the 280-pound kid in high school to becoming a bodybuilder, to flirting with keto, to being in a traumatic car accident, to spending years as an agoraphobic and coming out of it. And he's now my partner at WellStartCoach.com. He's one of the lead coaches at WellStart Health, and he and I together train coaches to help people make predictable, reliable, and sustainable positive changes in their health habits and outcomes. And the reason we're doing this show today is partly because next week we start another cohort of coach training. We're training people to be wellness coaches, to be health coaches, to develop a reliable process to help people. One of my criticism of the coaching profession is that it tends to be hit or miss. We've got lots of methods, tools, visualizations, assessments, processes, and we apply them sort of randomly and haphazardly. And our coach training provides a step-by-step roadmap for helping people make reliable, predictable, sustainable change. If you're interested, go to WellStartCoach.com. You can read about it and sign up for an enrollment interview. I hope by the end of this conversation that the people who are interested and who would be a good fit will go do that, because you'll understand what we're up to and why we do what we do. But the main goal of this conversation is to help people who are trying to change understand what the obstacles are that may have been getting in your way and how to begin to go about addressing those obstacles, whether you do it with a coach, with WellStart Health, or just on your own. You know, the thing is, we see predictable obstacles, the same sorts of things stop people, get in their way, slow them down, make them give up, and they're unnecessary. And so in this conversation, we're going to talk about the 7 different layers of habit change and help you self-diagnose through questions and through examples where you might be stuck, and then some of the things you can do to get unstuck. And if you're a coach, I hope this will be helpful for you in refining your practice. Before we get to it, one quick announcement, which is this podcast is supported by those who can afford it and available for those who cannot. So if you are a longtime listener and you think this is a message that is a good one out in the world, even for people who can't afford to pay for it, then you can put your money where your mouth is. You can become a supporter on Patreon and help me with the costs of running this podcast, both the fixed costs, the hard costs, the equipment, and my time. And you can do that at patreon.com and just go search for Plant Yourself, and it should be pretty self-explanatory from there. Or you can just go to plantyourself.com and look for the Patreon or donate links in the right sidebar. All right, let's talk about how to help others and ourselves change our habits and behaviors to become more healthy. Without further ado, Kevin Davis, welcome to the Plant Yourself Podcast.
Hey, Howard, thanks. It's kind of feels like this has been a long time coming. We've talked about this for some time. So.
Right. And then out of the blue, like this morning, I said, hey, can you do 11?
Yeah.
So I gave you 3 hours to prepare. So I'm expecting, a polished performance.
Oh, of course. I actually wrote out every word that I want to say and have everything memorized. So.
Yes. Right. Yeah. No, I have the teleprompter scrolling on my computer too. So far we're right on script.
Perfect.
So we're going to talk about a project that we're doing together, which is the WellStart Coach Training. But you've got your own cool, interesting story. So why don't we start by honoring that? Why don't you tell us first of all who you are, what you're up to, and then we'll get into kind of what brought you here.
Sure. Yeah. I'm Kevin Davis. I'm a health coach, but then also, as Howard kind of alluded to, the project that we're working on is training health coaches as well. So, what I really love to do is to not only to help people better themselves and their health and better their lives, but really to help people who want to help people. I love coaching coaches or training trainers. Is something that I've always loved to do. So, in that regard, my background started in personal training with a bachelor's degree in exercise science. And so I've spent a lot of time in that realm. But, even when I was doing that, even back right out of school, my favorite thing was to take kind of the knowledge of the new things that I had learned and turn that into something that I could teach the other trainers to do. So that's just kind of always been a part of my professional life that I enjoyed.
Great. And like almost like everyone at WellStart, you have your own dramatic health improvement story. Can we get into your story? Because it's certainly going to be relevant when we talk about polyvagal theory and one of the key differences between our coach training and others that I've seen out there.
Yeah, for sure. My story is kind of funny because like I sort of went both ways. You know, I got into personal training and strength coaching originally because I was overweight as a teenager and just kind of got into like the bodybuilding aspect of that. And so I was doing a lot of weightlifting, I always kind of had that mindset of like, oh, I'm too small, but also too fat, you know, wanting more muscle, but
when you say small, you mean like sort of scrawny, but fat? Cause you're pretty tall.
Yeah. And I never honestly was scrawny. But that's kind of the mentality. It's sort of, to me, that's what bodybuilding kind of mentality brought to me was like, I always need my arms to be another inch bigger and my chest to be another inch bigger and whatever that is to gain more muscle. So there's always like this struggle of, am I eating to cut fat or am I eating to gain weight or what am I doing? And it was always this kind of internal struggle between the two.
So the bodybuilding for you, was it mostly about appearance or was it strength or something else?
I suppose a combination of appearance and strength, but the reality came down to appearance. Mm-hmm. It very much was, you know, being a teenager, being overweight and not comfortable with my own body. And, you know, you're at that age where certainly girls are interesting and just this being a fat kid sort of, you know, thought of, oh, who's going to be attracted to me?
And when you say fat kid, like, are we talking, you know, Josh fat or?
No, 280, somewhere in the 280 kind of range was always
in high school?
In high school. Yeah.
That's pretty fat.
Yeah,
and you're what? You're 6'2"?
6'2". Mm-hmm. Correct. Yeah.
So what would a good weight have been for you? Like 200, 190, 180?
At that point, I probably would have been happy with 215. But in reality, I really, you know, now that I've actually gotten to a healthier weight and through a healthier lifestyle, I'm much happier. 185, 190, anywhere in that range. I would say the best shape of my life has always been in the mid to upper 180s.
Mm-hmm. So essentially you were 100 pounds overweight in high school.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And when you started bodybuilding, did you lose the fat or did you just kind of get beefy and some definition around it?
Yeah, some of both, somewhere in between those two, I think. Mm-hmm. And there was a point where through that I lost almost all the fat and I got very lean and had a lot of muscle and realistically, objectively looking at it now, my body was looking pretty good. But even then, I still had that mentality of I need to be bigger and I need to be less fat. Mm-hmm. That's bigger and smaller at the same time.
Uh-huh. So even when your body was sort of getting close to the perfection you were craving and maybe looking at in the magazines, it didn't really affect your self-image that much.
No, it didn't. No. Mm-hmm. The self-image was still poor there. and it's fun. And it's kind of interesting that, you know, I suppose that it's something about the way I was going about it and the reasoning behind it, because now, you know, my reason for being healthy and for being fit is very, very different. And my thought process is more, I love the description that you and Josh talked about was it last week or the week before, the podcast with Josh Lajani?
Yeah, last week.
Talking about power.
Uh-huh. Right.
Speaking about power. And that really struck a chord with me, because the difference now to me is thinking about what my body can do and, you know, having a healthier body and a longer, healthier life with more energy, rather than thinking about, well, I can look like a guy in the magazine, you know, look sexy with my shirt off or whatever kind of a mentality didn't do the same for me. But so I did that. The bodybuilding was kind of the process then, and it just really, it wasn't about health at all. So, if caffeine was going to help me lose 5 more pounds over the next 12 weeks, then okay, we're taking a bunch of caffeine pills or something. Whatever it was to get leaner and get stronger was all that really mattered, not the health. So the problem with that is then when things came up a little bit later in life, then I wasn't healthy. I didn't have a healthy diet. I didn't have a healthy mindset. And so it was very easy to put that weight back on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, so when you were 280 in high school, so I'm imagining that some part of your brain is going, okay, so Kevin Davis's default is fat kid, and he can overcome that with intense amounts of weightlifting and crazy diet hacks, but that's all plate spinning. And basically, if Kevin doesn't keep doing that, he then springs back into his original shape. What was your diet that got you to 280 and kept you there?
That got me to 280? Oh, that was the Burger King diet. It's funny because I can remember even before I got to that weight, being younger and having that, and I'm sure a lot of people, a lot of guys out there, a lot of people out there can relate to this, is that mentality as a kid of, oh, I can eat as much as dad. So, I may have been half of dad's size, and I may have been not very old, and dad's a grown man eating a full meal, but then I want to eat that full meal. We go to Burger King and get the big double Whopper with the fries and all that stuff.
Is there more there? Because when, like in my understanding, eating the standard American diet and trying to match dad and going to Burger King, that could do 30, 40, 50 pounds for you. 100 pounds, I find there's usually some sort of emotional thing or trauma or something. Were you just like an overachiever, or was there more driving your weight than just the the thermodynamics of calories?
Yeah, at that point, it's hard to say. I suppose I haven't really done a deep dive in what sort of emotional things may have led to that. I mean, like I said, I almost wonder. I think the matching dad, the being as big and strong and eating as much as dad thing, was the way that I developed the ability to gain that. By doing that, then at a younger age, I'm eating more food than I really need. But I always loved food in general, and that's what's funny is you asked what I ate, and it's like, yeah, I did the standard American diet, but I ate a ton of healthy things. I had a ton of vegetables as well. My grandparents always had a huge garden, and they would grow all these fresh vegetables, and so most of our vegetables came from there. But I could have a huge portion of okra or beans or whatever it was, but then also have a handful of fried pies afterward.
Gotcha. All right, so you were doing the bodybuilding and getting cut and not feeling that you were a different person, but sort of plate spinning. Then what happened?
Well, so actually, one thing that, when you mentioned the plate spinning, one thing that I think is interesting is I did a lot of that, like bouncing back and forth. So I would spin the plates for a few months, and then, in college, for example, I would spin the plates all summer long and drop a whole bunch of weight. And then in the fall, I would go back to school and party with my friends and eat pizza and drink beer and gain even more back. And it's almost like I had deprived myself, because I had that deprivation mindset, right? So I deprived myself for 3 months. So then when it came time where I was going to eat the pizza, instead of eating, a couple slices, I ate the whole thing and had ice cream with it.
Gotcha.
So that went on for a few years. Eventually got into relatively good shape. I wouldn't say very good health, but pretty good shape. And at one point I was in a car accident, and that was really, I think, as much as some of what happened afterward felt like a lot of suffering and felt like a terrible thing that, I would wish I could take back or whatever. I think that was the moment that really was, if you want to call it like a turning point for me in my life, because I had all this, exercise knowledge, and I'd tried all these diets and done all this stuff, but I got in that car accident. It was fairly serious for the car, but I wasn't physically injured. But then afterward, I started feeling panic attacks, and my heart would be doing these crazy things. And just, I didn't have health insurance at the time, so I didn't go see a doctor, didn't get anything diagnosed to realize that there was nothing wrong with me. And I got to a point where I thought that maybe I had messed up my heart or done something terrible to my body, to my health, because of all of the bodybuilding, all the caffeine and all of those, stimulants to lose weight.
Mm. Well, can you describe like the salient part of the car accident?
Well, so the car accident, that was, I was in a car, and someone was swerving into my lane, and I had the option of either, hitting them, and we've got a two-person, two-vehicle accident, or going off on a sidewalk where there were no people. So I chose the sidewalk, and it turns out that was broken apart and very slick. So I hit the brakes and just slammed right into a large telephone pole or light pole. And the hood of the vehicle crumpled up into sort of like a V shape, or an upside down V shape, where I could see into the engine, and the engine burst into flames as I was sitting there. A little bit scary, kind of freaked me out. And the part that really made it worse was that as I was trying to get out of the car to run away from the flames, the seatbelt didn't want to release. So I felt trapped.
Hmm.
And I think that was, had a lot to do with where things went for me, was that fear, that feeling trapped that came from not being able to undo the seatbelt for a minute or two, however long it was that it actually, obviously my concept of time there's a little bit off, but it felt like it took a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So that led to me just remaining in that frozen in the fight or flight state. Just the fear stayed there. And it took years for me to really get to a point where I could do most things in life that I used to do.
Right. And I think that, this will be really important, because when we talk about the coach training, can you talk about what, like, looking back, with everything you know now about anxiety and trauma, like what actually happened to you, and what, and how did it manifest in your body and your psyche, and what did it take to overcome it?
So, it's interesting, because as I listen to people talk about how this sort of thing works, how trauma works, I now know, or I now feel that if I had known what I do now, if I had been able to react and respond to it, it may not have been so much suffering afterward. The problem is I felt trapped, and so our body goes into that fight, flight, or freeze kind of mechanism. Probably a lot of us have heard of the fight or flight response. For me, that meant heart rate elevating and adrenaline pumping, and breathing getting shallow and feeling like it was difficult to breathe, and a lot of these symptoms. If you look up the symptoms of a panic attack, there's a huge list, and they say for it to be a true panic attack, you've got to have, and I forget what the 3 symptoms or something like that. And I always wished that I only had 3. I was like, no, that list is pretty much what I'm feeling right now. But so I went into that state, right? And this high adrenaline, this high heart rate, this shallow breathing state that I'm in. And I didn't have any sort of response to work through this. I just stayed there, and I felt those feelings, and I felt trapped in that moment. and the experience, the action of what happened in that car accident, at this point, that is something that is just a story of a thing that happened in my life. Like I could tell you that I went out to lunch with my father last week, and that was a thing that happened in my life, and it doesn't, cause a whole lot of trauma or crazy emotional feelings for me down the road. It was just a lunch, and I had a salad, whatever. But this car accident, because of being frozen in that state and not dealing with it and not incorporating it as part of my story, it just became a permanently stuck, a place where I stayed for, like I said, for years. It was as though I was just in that car accident, reliving it over and over again. I couldn't go to the movies. I didn't go to the movies for, I think it was like 8 years or something like that.
What was it about the experience of being at the movies that was unbearable?
It was as silly as this might sound, it was a trapped feeling. I've paid and I've gone into this movie, and this movie lasts for 2 hours and 13 minutes, and I'm supposed to stay in this seat, stay in this theater, and not leave during that time. And even though technically, you have the choice to leave a movie in the middle of it if you want to, I felt like I didn't. And so even just going to a movie felt like I was trapped, just like I was in that car when I wanted to get out and couldn't.
Uh-huh.
And I use the movie example, and that may not mean a whole lot to some people, but to me, that was, I always loved, going to movies. As a teenager in my 20s, that was always one of my favorite things to do, was go to the movies. I can remember going, and we would pick an 8:00 movie and a 10:00 movie and see them back to back.
Huh.
So for me to not want to do that was fairly significant.
Gotcha. So then what happened? How did you begin to heal, and where'd you go from there?
So for me, coaching was really what helped begin the healing process. I really was kind of just grasping at straws, looking for anything that I could find that might get me out of this. I just felt like I was suffering. I was having these panic attacks, 3 times a day. I had quit my job and started personal training just kind of on my own. I was training people in the garage out behind my house just so that I wouldn't have to drive, because it was the same road where the accident happened that I had to drive to get to work. So there was, some major life changes, and then I was just looking for any little thing. And if I heard that maca root powder was, beneficial when you're going through stress, then I would buy maca root powder and make a little smoothie out of it or something. You know what I mean? Just whatever I could find.
Uh-huh.
At some point, my mom actually found an anxiety specific coaching program online, and it was specifically coaching, not therapy or counseling. And that's kind of something that we distinguish in what we do, as far as what type of work you're doing with someone. And we can talk about that later, but I worked with this coach, and he kind of gave me some of these skills of using meditation and mindfulness, some different visualization techniques, to be able to just calm my mind and my nervous system down. Because initially, all the cognitive talk in the world was great. And then and you could talk about all these logical ways to think about things and how there's nothing wrong with your heart. And, it can handle all of this, fast beating that it's doing and all this stuff. But without having my body, my mind, my nervous system calm down, none of that stuff really meant anything. I was still having panic attacks all the time. So the meditation and relaxation, getting into a daily habit of that, was really, really the big thing that changed everything for me. Gave me the opportunity to dive a little deeper and continue to develop those muscles, those skills to be able to work through this. And now, there's not a whole lot that I really restrict myself on.
Right. And let's put a pin in that, because let's come back to it when we talk about how relevant that is for coaching people to change their habits and lifestyles. But let's continue with your journey. Eventually, you figured out how to eat, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, so eventually after that accident, I figured out how to eat bad again. Excuse me. And put all that weight back on that I had lost through college and through all those years of doing the bodybuilding. Some of the advice that I got somewhere along the way with that anxiety was that maybe I should not be doing as much exercise because it produces lactic acid, and lactic acid can cause panic attacks. And so I don't believe that that's actually good advice that anyone should listen to at this point, because I realize that the exercise also teaches your body to get rid of the lactic acid, to flush it out more effectively. But because of that advice, I stopped being active. And then I continued to eat unhealthy foods and put all that weight back on. So put all that weight back on. I'm back up around the 280 mark again. But this time now I'm at that 280 while feeling like I can't do anything physically because I've stopped exercising. And I got to a point where I felt like I couldn't even, take my dogs for a decent walk. I would go a half a mile walk with my dogs and feel like that was pushing it for me. A flight of stairs felt like, just a huge task to me.
Mm-hmm. And were you still working as like a fitness trainer at this point?
At that point, I was not. So I was mainly working just in the anxiety coaching by then.
Okay.
So, but all the while, while I was going through that, there was a period of a few years where I somehow came across a couple of people that some of the folks out there listening to might have heard of, this guy named Rich Roll and this Howard Jacobson guy. And I had heard, I can recall, I think it might have even been Dr. Khan, but I can remember hearing an interview with a medical doctor on a couple of these podcasts, and then so started learning about this idea of eating a lot of plants and not eating all the junk that I was eating before, and how big and how helpful that could be in my life. And it was just kind of planting seeds for a couple of years there.
Mm-hmm.
And that was initially a lot of the stuff with Rich Roll. And then, came along to the time when I was starting to get ready to try, when I was tired of being physically incapable of what I used to be able to do, or what even just I thought a normal human being should be able to do, walk their dogs or things like that. I just got tired of it. I wanted to lose the weight, and
well, Rich's story is so resonant with your experience.
Oh, big time!
Right,
it really did. I mean, especially you even get down to he had kind of that freak out going up the stairs and worrying about his heart.
Yeah. Which probably he doesn't really talk about anxiety, but probably it was in there, right?
Oh, it had to be. It had to be. I mean, when I first heard him tell that story, I was like, oh yeah, I'm with you, man. This feels very familiar.
Uh-huh.
And so and it's funny because I was listening to all this stuff and to all these people talk about this healthier way of life for a couple of years, and there was a time period where I started doing some plant-based meals, and I remember I did this thing where I would slice zucchinis and cook them on like a George Foreman type grill and put pizza sauce and stuff on them or whatever, and make a little thing, and
that sounds pretty
trying
good.
out. Yeah, it was awesome. Season it and some vegetables on top and stuff, and it was really good. And so I got into that, and then my wife and I moved. And to a place where
so a lady married you?
She did. Can you believe it?
Well, not from your description of yourself.
Yeah, it's amazing.
When did that happen, and what effect did that have on your life, on your self-esteem?
Well, so I think that relationship really has a lot to do with the fact that I was able to kind of gain a little self-esteem and be able to build that back up. I mean, to be fair, we did meet during the time when I had, lost a lot of that weight and was in, pretty good shape at the time. but through whether I was in great shape or gained a few pounds, because that was a very yo-yo time in my life, right, with the bodybuilding that I was doing, and that sort of mentality and the fad dieting, and the way that she felt, or the way that she talked to me, or the way that she looked at me, like, never changed, even if I gained 30 pounds. So, just kind of very interesting that didn't change anything. And
Right.
so
And of course,
over years of hearing that,
and
I guess eventually.
And Josh has exactly the same story.
Yeah.
Right, Josh Lajani, and kind of, Rich Roll as well, where, I talked to his wife on the podcast, and she was like, the day that I gave up on him in terms of trying to change him and just sort of unconditionally loved him for who he was, is the day that there was the space into which he could step with autonomy.
There must be something to that.
So, yeah, I feel like this podcast would be a lot truer if we just had the spouses of the people.
That might be that actually is a really interesting idea. I almost wonder, and this would be a lot of work to coordinate all of this, but how cool would it kind of be if you had the person, and then the next episode was their spouse?
Yeah.
This is what really happened.
Right. All right. Anyway, so back to your story. So you and your wife moved somewhere?
So we moved to a small town, and there was not a lot of health food stores or a lot of plant-based options or things like that. I mean, it was a place where it was either seafood or barbecue, and that was kind of the culture, and that was the food that was there. And I really and so even though I had kind of started experimenting and getting interested in this plant-based eating, then we went there, and it was like, oh, here's all these people eating this way and living this way. And so I just started doing that, kind of went back the other direction. And I mean, I've always loved to cook. I was a huge meat eater, and I mean, just barbecuing stuff all the time. On a Tuesday, I might be making a giant brisket at home for 12 hours, and just really into that, and drinking a lot, partying, even on weekdays, not just saving it for the weekends, just all the time, and just really overindulging. And so then I gained the rest of that weight back.
Okay.
But I still had that seed of knowledge in my head from the stuff. And honestly, through all of that, I still found these podcasts very interesting to listen to.
Right. Well, it's funny what happens when nothing's happening sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to get her on the podcast. I was talking to a woman at the recent conference I attended in DC who has a smoking cessation program where their kind of big differentiator is, like, don't try to quit unless you're ready to quit. So don't set a quit date. But while you're not just committing to quit, there's a whole bunch of things you can do other than just smoke and feel guilty.
Right.
Right. So you can keep smoking. You don't have to feel bad about yourself, and you can gain sort of knowledge and experience and insight and use that time productively rather than what most programs do, which is insist that you set a quit date that may not be realistic. And it sounds like you were incubating something, even while it looked on the outside like no motion.
Well, it's funny because I almost was. That incubation period was kind of accidental. I didn't have like you talk about a program like that where you say, okay, we set this quit date and there's this period, but I didn't even have a quit date in mind. I just was living that way, but all in the back of my mind, I'm still learning this information. And then, eventually I got an Audible subscription, and that really helped. Because
so what flipped the switch for you?
The Blue Zones.
The
Blue Zones. Because as soon as I read that and started thinking more about longevity, that's where it really started helping me to think differently about the purpose of why I would eat better and why I would move my body more into a longevity perspective. And I suppose, honestly, even the seed for that, though, was planted a couple years earlier, because as I say that, the thought comes to my mind of a conversation that I had on the podcast that I used to host. My co-host and I were talking one time. It was an anxiety coaching podcast. And we were talking one time about a conversation she had with her husband, and he was going to do this long swim. And she said, "Oh, well, do you want me to go beside you in the kayak just in case?" And he said, "No, I trust my body." And, the thought struck her, and the same thing when she told me the story, like, wow, I trust my body. And that, that really is the difference. I was at a place where I didn't trust my body. And so then when I read the Blue Zones and then followed that, shortly after that with the China study in Proteinaholic, and then from there on, it just became everything I could find. But those 3 books were kind of the initial. But as I started going through that, it was like, I want to be able to trust my body. I want to be able to do what I want to do with my body again. I've always loved being outdoors and hiking and swimming and biking and all these different things. And it's like, there's no way I was going to do any of those things if I wasn't comfortable taking my dogs for a half-mile walk.
Mm-hmm. Right. And a quick aside is that when you started doing the cooking, you're pretty inventive. So I don't know, are you still doing a lot of Instagram? Because I'm not really up on Instagram, but Kevin Eats Plants has been a huge source of ideas and inspiration for folks around ways to eat healthy that are still like fun and palatable.
Oh, and it's kind of interesting because that was my, that also helped make it something to commit to and something of a hobby for me. I love to cook. And like you said, I was very, interested and inventive in what I wanted to make and what I wanted to cook and trying new recipes and making things up. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, well, I'm going to eat all these plants and stuff. So what the heck do I make? Which is, I think, a very common question that people ask themselves. What am I going to eat now? And so all of a sudden I just took that as a challenge, as a hobby for myself to learn how to cook, without, cooking vegetables in a bunch of oil or butter or something, without the meat, without the fish, without any of that stuff, just plants and using vegetable broth if I'm sauteing anything, and, I even enjoyed, on occasion, I'll try making out like a cashew based cheese, or, my wife's favorite food's always been pizza. So Friday night I get a Engine 2 whole grain crust and make my own sauce and put some vegetables and blend some cashews with water and garlic and make a cheesy sauce to put on top.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, pepperoni flavor on last week's.
Yes, pepperoni flavor is my biggest. So I found out that basically paprika, garlic, crushed red pepper is the main, and fennel is the main flavoring of pepperoni. So I put that on top of there now.
Great. So Kevin Eats Plants on Instagram is where you can find these great pictures and yummy stuff.
Yeah, and hook up with me there. I'm a little bit less frequent with that stuff now. I just had a baby 10 weeks ago today, and so I'm a little bit focused on him at the moment. But right. Try to do the occasional post.
And just in the interest of full disclosure, your wife helped.
She was there for some moral support.
Yeah. So we don't want to give them too much credit, but where it's due, right?
Yes, yeah. Give her what she deserves.
She was part of the operation.
She showed up.
Yeah.
She did a wonderful job. In case she hears this, we should really be honest. She did a fantastic job. And
wait, in case she hears this, she's not a devoted listener to Plant Yourself?
She sees my name on there. She may not want to hear it.
I'm crushed.
She might be embarrassed. No. She had a fully plant-based pregnancy and did a great job, and she was able to be active and exercising the whole time. And this kid at 10 weeks old, every doctor we see talks about how he's advanced and ahead of schedule. So,
yes, he's definitely ready for middle school, if not college. He's not quite 3 months old. He's an amazing kid.
Well, I like to throw that out there just because I can recall when she got pregnant and we were starting to look at all this stuff, you start to see questions out there like, oh, is it safe to go through pregnancy this way? And or is your baby going to be okay? And he's better than okay. So.
Right on. Oh, well,
anyway.
Let's so then we met, we started talking. Mm-hmm. You told me about all the coaches you had trained, and I was just getting ready to start doing that. So we partnered up for WellStart to train health coaches. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, that's been really exciting for me. It's kind of cool. I get to make friends with people like Howard, which is a lot of fun. Howard, I know all you guys.
Are there people like me?
Well, there's one.
Okay. It'd be nice to know that there were people like I would go find them and be validated.
I get to make friends with person like Howard.
With person.
And I mean, Howard is not only, I'm sure all of you, anybody that's listening to this is listening because they enjoy your work and your podcast and maybe, some of what you've written and things like that. But, Howard's genuine. He actually is just a great person who really cares about people. So this is not like a fake character that he's putting on for the show or anything like that. And that really, well, I mean, that really makes doing this work that we do together a lot more enjoyable and made it a lot more interesting, exciting for me to get involved with.
Yeah, and right back at you. I mean, just from your insights about anxiety and trauma, which I want to talk about because I think it's one of the two missing links in coaching, which tends to be extremely cerebral and put it on your calendar. Like that's our move. Like the reason you haven't, you're 280 pounds and you haven't exercised in 6 years is because you never thought of putting it on your calendar, right? Like that's our.
Wait, I can put it on my calendar?
That's our coaching move.
Yep.
And your ability to kind of see the whole room, because we do coaching cohorts to kind of get a sense of where everybody's at, what everybody needs, and your attention to detail. So there's no way this thing exists without your fundamental support and all the insights that you bring to it. But let's talk about what we believe about coaching, just so and I want to do this for two reasons. One is if anyone is listening and wants to become a health coach or wants to become a better health coach, I want to I want this to be valuable for you, but also for anyone who wants to change, because what we teach coaches, like the coaches always apply to themselves, right? Like they'll come back after week 2 of the program like, hey, I quit soda, finally for the first time ever. So I want this to be useful for people who are just trying to understand how to change and how to maintain it.
I think like off the bat, like a very basic thing we can say is a big difference in what we're trying to do to, this is a real coaching method. I mean, it's not a lot of the times, I've done coaching certifications in the past and things like that. And it really kind of leans toward just rah, let me be your cheerleader and try to motivate you when your motivation gets low and push you and tell you to put it on the calendar, like you said, Howard, and that's not. We're trying to go a lot deeper than that and actually help you to develop the skills to be able to make these changes on your own.
All right, so maybe we could talk about the graphic, which all of you driving in your cars cannot see. So pull over if you're running. Pull out your phone. So it'll be in the show notes. And since we are recording the same day as we're going to publish, I know the URL. It's going to be plantyourself.com/320. So it'll be in the show notes, and it'll be a PDF of a pyramid. And this is we call it the WellStart Health Attainment Model. and it's got 7 layers. I don't imagine you have it in front of you in the car, but
Oh, I do.
you do. See that?
do.
See that? Always the overachiever.
Well, I had a year to prepare, so.
So the bottom layer is motivation. So that's the question of, do I want to do it? Right. And most health coaching focuses on this as the central basis, and that's a modality typically known as motivational interviewing. And I don't know, did you study this when you were doing coach training?
Not deeply, but I also felt like it wasn't. I don't know. I think it was the focus of some of the stuff that I looked at, but to be honest, to go and do some of these certifications that focus on that, I felt like I didn't actually have to bother studying. I'd just go take the test and have a certification.
Right. Well, and what motivational interviewing is great for, and it's definitely a necessary, arrow in the quiver.
Sure.
Is especially in clinical settings where someone comes in to see their doctor because they want a prescription upped or they want a procedure, and someone wants to intervene and say, hey, you don't need to go down this road. You could take control. You could change your life. You could eat better. You could start moving. You could quit smoking. Like, for that conversation, motivational interviewing is perfect.
Sure.
And because we're now trying to move into a lifestyle medicine model, it became the thing that we had to teach doctors and nurses and other clinicians, because otherwise they would just sort of finger wag and say, hey, you need to lose 25 pounds. Why don't you join the gym? Or why don't you stop, watch your donuts? And of course that doesn't work. So motivational interviewing is absolutely critical for turning people from I don't want to do this to I do want to do this. But that's not the only thing that makes a difference. And the trouble is that once people are motivated, it's very easy for them to become unmotivated.
Yeah, I think that's the huge difference here, right? Is rather than the motivation being the almost the entirety of the methodology or the program that you're coaching with, for us, it's the base. So, if anybody's not looking at the graphic, what we're talking about is it's a pyramid. And so, there's a base of a pyramid, and you've got to have something as a foundation to start from, a place to start from. And that's kind of where we start, is that motivation. There's got to be some level of motivation, or nobody's going to want to coach with you. You're not going to want to do the work.
Right. And what I've seen in a lot of coaches is that every time, okay, put it on your calendar. Great. I'll talk to you next week. Did you do it? No, something came up. I didn't feel like it. There was an emergency. Something else was more important. I forgot. My phone was on vibrate and I didn't hear the ding. And then we go, okay, let's remember your big why. And let's, who benefits when you make this change? And we get them all pumped up again. Okay, this week, you're going to do it? Yeah. Okay, let's put it on your calendar. And it's like, and I've heard this from so many coaches, that this is the thing that and we have all these tools for, like, imagine yourself in 10 years, imagine your future self writing you a letter. Like, essentially, it's all still motivation.
Right.
And the problem is that, they're leaky tires. We are all leaky tires when it comes to motivation. And so we think someone comes in with a flat, we're just going to pump them up. And we can hear the hissing as they leave us, but they're good for another 36 hours until the motivation naturally wanes again. So,
or they hit a pothole and the motivation's completely gone.
Yeah. Oh well, this proves I'm a screw up.
Yeah, and then I'm done.
Right.
So, but to be fair, I do want to say that the motivation, I mean, that is something that we still, some of the techniques that you talked about, there are still things that we'll use throughout the program. I may text someone, as I'm text coaching and they are 30 weeks in or 20 weeks into something. and ask them to kind of remember or remind themselves of who is it that you're doing this for, or what is your motivation, or what is your big why. But that's not all. We may remind them of that periodically, but also do the deeper, stuff that we're going to talk about in the rest of the pyramid.
Right. There's no reason if someone's riding their bike and they're a little flat not to put air in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. But if their gears are stripped and all we're doing is refilling the tires, then we're not addressing the issue.
They're still going to spin.
Yeah. So let's move up one level, which the next level is self-efficacy. And the question there is, can I imagine myself doing it, successfully doing it? And yes. I find this is a bigger sticking point than motivation. Because almost, I don't know too many people who would, if you said, hey, if I could wave a magic wand and you could be healthy, and they'd go, no, I'm fine. I prefer, my insulin and glucophage. I prefer the neuropathy and I'm looking forward to the toe amputation, right? It's not that they don't want the results, it's that they don't truly believe that they can have them.
And this is definitely, I think, kind of a big step here, because, we can say, oh, well, look at, Kevin lost, this 100 pounds. Kevin made these changes, or look at Josh, did a couple 100 pounds, that sort of thing. But even then, people will still make sort of that, kind of excuse, or I don't know if it's really even necessarily an excuse, but kind of your mind goes to, well, that's him. There's something special about him.
Right. I was texting with Josh this morning about how he was just featured at his university, did a TV story about him and this amazing guy. And he's like, I'm just a fat kid from the trailer park who did what anybody could do. Like, I'm nothing special. So I was saying, like, we should get in business cards that say, Josh LaJaunie, chief of nothing special, WellStart Health. But people don't believe it.
Yeah.
Right. And when, I didn't believe it when I met him either, because we don't have a way of conceptualizing ourselves that heroically.
Right.
Right. So there must be something special. So the way we deal with this is by giving people tiny wins and showing them that, that they have efficacy in most areas of their lives. Like the same person who can't resist a jelly donut at the office is the same person who gets up at 4 a.m. to take their kid to the ER if they complain of a stomach ache, because it might be appendicitis. They're the same person who get up at 5 a.m. so that they can, get their work done, get the kids ready for school, take care of a aging parent, and be at work on time. Like they do lots of things no matter what, but they have never applied the no matter what mindset that they've already mastered to this arena of personal health and eating habits. Yeah,
and I think maybe along with that is sort of this mentality that we have of, like, we want everything right now. We want a magic button to push, and so I don't know. I almost feel like it's, if I think back to my experience and the times when I've lost weight, all those early days with the bodybuilding and that sort of thing and doing the fad diets, it was, I push this button, right? Like I take away everything except for chicken breasts, and now I eat 3 chicken breasts a day for 12 weeks, or you know what I mean? Whatever that diet was, you change overnight this huge, big, drastic change and cut out a bunch of stuff, and you suffer through it for 12 weeks or 16 weeks, versus, this time around, and the way that we would be a lot more likely to talk to someone is, if you can make these small changes, take these small steps, show yourself that you can do it with, changing one bite of food every day, maybe this week, or one meal. When I lost all this weight and went on a plant-based diet, it wasn't an overnight thing for me. I dropped, I had meat once a week for the first 3 months, but I showed myself that I could do it. And then once eventually I never had even a quit date for that. I got to one point and I said, the other 6 days I'm not missing the meat. I can do it. I'm just fine. And there's nothing that I need out of it. Why am I eating it on Saturday?
Right.
I can do it. So I did.
Yeah. You ever watch the Winter Olympics, the ski jump?
Yeah.
Like, I always think, like, I could never do that. Like, I don't know, like, how people, practice, like, the 6-year-olds who eventually win gold medals in ski jump. Like, what are they doing? But it's probably not the adult ski jump. Right?
I hope not.
but we look at people who are, living that life and, like, full on, like, running daily and eating really clean. And we go, oh, I could never do that. In the same way that I would look at the ski jump and say, well, I could never do that. Right? We don't see that there are 1,000 incremental steps that are not only doable, but they're self-reinforcing. That every time you succeed at one of these tiny little steps, you are now a slightly different person, and you've gotten self-efficacy. You now believe, you have proof that you have systems that will allow you to change. And so I think one of the strong things that our coach training provides is those systems, that once somebody learns the rules of how to make a food rule, or the rules of how to engage in a fight through, or the rules of how to assess a past slip up and apply it to the future with a fast assessment and a when then plan, that now they say, oh yeah, well, no matter what happens, I know my moves. I'm not confused and lost. Like, there's always, it's like a flow chart. Here I am. Okay. Did it go yes or no? Based on that, this is my next move. And it's a very business-like, predictable process, as opposed to thinking of behavior change as like trying to capture, lightning with a kite string.
Well, and I can, as a coach, I can remember, going through and not having this, we talk about it as a roadmap in the course, or this process. And it's like, you're talking to someone and you're going through a session and whatever, things come up, and it's like, you're just trying to think as quick as you can. Like, okay, what do I need to tell them? What's going to be the thing that works? Like, oh God, I need an idea. Hurry up. Just to come up with what is the right solution. Versus having, if we can teach them, and we talk all the time about building the muscles, right? Building the skills or the muscles to do the things that are going to lead to success, then that's a much more predictable process. And you're not sitting there as a coach scrambling to figure out, like, oh, should I tell them to put it on their calendar, or what should I tell them to do?
Right. I mean, as a personal trainer, if somebody wants to be able to bench press 280 pounds, right, it's a very predictable process how you're going to get them there.
It is.
Right, and they have to build their muscles. And I love that. What we're doing is teaching people how to build their habit change muscles.
Yeah.
And it's no more mysterious than that.
That's right.
Okay. All right, so the next level up, I'll do the three together: strategy, tactics, and ability. Which is where, like, plant-based coaches spend a lot of their time. In other words, do I know how to do it? So, do I know basically how to eat? So, caloric density, whole foods, right? So, the basics of the information, and then tactics. Do I know what to do? Okay, so now I know I should be eating whole plant foods. Like, what does that look like on my plate? Oh, a baked potato smothered in salsa with some avocado on top. Okay, so now I know what it looks like. And skill, and then ability. Do I have the skills to do it? Can I cut an onion? Can I choose fresh produce? Can I build a salad? And that's really where sort of people who like take plant-based cooking classes to become teachers. This is where we spend our time on teaching people the details, doing going to their houses or teaching them how to throw stuff out and what to, pantry cleanses, take them to the supermarket, doing cooking demos. Right. This is all crucial stuff, and it's not the be all and end all, because if someone still can't imagine themselves successfully sticking to something, it doesn't matter that you've just thrown out everything in their pantry that's non-compliant and gone on a $500 shopping trip with them and bought all the balsamic vinegars and nooch and produce. They're not going to stick with it.
Well, if you think about it, Howard, when I was talking about my story, the time when, several years back when I had listened to some of these podcasts and I'd heard Rich Roll's story and I'd heard, all this stuff and I started making that zucchini thing on the George Foreman. It's like, I knew the strategy. I had something to do, right? Because I knew what to make, right? And I knew how to make that zucchini meal or whatever those meals were that I was doing. But then I didn't have the follow through. And so that's what's interesting is you can be kind of stuck in that point as well for a while of knowing what to do, knowing how to do it, and even having the skills.
Right. Well, you anticipated the next rung of the ladder, which is follow through. And the question that I've come up with for follow through is, do I do it even when I don't feel like it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big, because it's very easy to just slip back into old patterns or even, we talked earlier about emotional things. I mean, some of those foods, that we've, eaten for years, ice cream can be your emotional food or whatever it is, can be like this emotional comfort food. And that's very easy to slip back into when you don't quite have, that follow through, that consistency.
Right. And people think that follow through happens when the cravings go away. Or when the impulses resolve themselves, or when the voice in your head that tells you to do something that you don't want to do finally goes away.
No, and we actually teach people to do a fight through, not even just a follow through, but a fight through to flex that muscle. I mean, this, we talk about building the muscles, and one of the muscles that you build is that muscle that gives you the strength to follow through even when that urge is there.
Right. And it's only in those moments that we grow.
Yeah.
Right. So imagine, you want to become a great sailor, and you go out on the lake in your catamaran or sunfish or whatever every single day, and the winds are perfect for what you're trying to do. Everywhere you want to go, you've got a wind at your back, and it's the right speed and the right direction. You could do that for 100 days and never improve.
Right.
Right. It's only when the winds are blowing right at you and you have to tack wildly, or you have to, figure out how to keep the boat safe and afloat in rough chop. That's when you actually grow as a sailor. And you only grow your muscles, your habit muscles, when they are challenged. So we teach people to kind of look forward to those moments where, oh man, there's going to be pizza at the office today. Like, great, let's make a plan. Let's not go into it like a newbie trying to ski jump. And let's make sure that we have a plan, and let's sort of stress test the plan in our minds, and let's look forward to those opportunities where we are challenged, as opposed to basically trying to carpet the world so we never have to face them.
Well, yeah, we don't want to have to live in a bubble. It's funny because we talked about my experience with anxiety, and I mentioned that I quit my job and all these things. That's what I was doing there. I wasn't, at that part of, that stage of my anxiety process, I wasn't, building these abilities and building this consistency and this follow through and getting really any improvement. I just narrowed my life. I brought everything down to a place where I felt comfortable. And then all of a sudden, I sort of felt like I was experiencing less anxiety on a day-to-day basis, but it was because I was not experiencing anything else either.
Right. And people, our coaching clients will come to us at WellStart and they will proudly tell us, hey, my wife we went to the supermarket and I stayed in the car.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or I didn't go to the break room all day today. Or I skipped going to the pub with my buddies and when we all chat and drink beer. And great. Is that how you want to live?
Right.
Right. Or
because you can be much more empowered if you go to that pub and you order, a salad and a glass of water.
right. And then other people get to see you,
Uh-huh.
living your new way, and you get to practice peer pressure, you get to practice cravings. And we're not saying jump off of the high jump, but practice. It's almost like what's that? Exposure therapy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and Howard, when we talk about doing it kind of that way, it's sort of the difference. It's one of the major differences, actually, if you get at the root of it, from what I did before with the bodybuilding and the fad diets and all that, and what I've done now. While, on the surface, you could very easily say, oh, I'm eating this plant-based diet, so that's the difference. Like, that's the whole difference. But in reality, a lot of the difference of what I'm doing is now I have this healthy lifestyle, and I have the ability, the identity, the follow-through to do this, even in the situations where maybe I wouldn't have before. And in the previous, it was, oh, I'm eating low carb or whatever it is. But then when I'm out with people, I can't really be in that situation. So I've got to spend 12 weeks confined to my little bubble here so that I can lose, the 30 or 40 pounds. And then after that, I come back out of the bubble. And now that I'm not in the bubble anymore, I'm not eating healthy anymore. I'm not following my diet anymore.
Right. And that is a perfect excuse.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the top layer of the pyramid, and then wind in the anxiety stuff that we talked about earlier.
Sure.
So the tippy top of the pyramid we call identity, and the question, I think there's probably a better question to get at it, but right now am I the kind of person who does this?
Yeah.
So it's almost like it's a noun. Like, am I instead of do I eat healthy? Am I a healthy eater? Am I the sort of person who eats cheese? Right? Am I the sort of person who gets up every morning and works out hard? Right. And once we get to that point, we are no longer plate spinning. Right. That we've now achieved an identity, and it's a bigger identity usually than just I'm a healthy eater. It's usually something like I'm a performance machine. I'm an athlete. I am a responsible parent. Like, it's those identities that are connected to our core values. Then say, oh, well, if I am an athlete, then I eat like an athlete. Right? Josh always talks about one of the great reasons to have a race on your calendar is that it's a great excuse to give people why you're not doing the bad stuff. Right?
Yeah.
Oh, I can't have a beer. I got a race in 2 weeks. My coach would kill me.
Well, that's just so much more powerful too when it comes time for, there's this temptation. If you have a reason why you're not going to follow the temptation, then it's a lot easier to do. Than just, I don't want to, or I shouldn't. Just saying I shouldn't, those negative kind of thoughts. Instead, you can say, well, I've got the race coming up, or I am a runner. I'm someone who is an athlete, and by making this healthier choice, I'm strengthening myself and increasing my ability.
All right. And if that you do that long enough, it becomes your new default. Your default is no longer Kevin the fat kid. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, that's, I'm sure there's some part of you, there's some voice that doesn't go away around that, but by and large, the way you live your life and the way you're thinking about yourself is not, Kevin the default fat kid who has to spin plates to not be fat. Right.
No, and I feed that fat kid very differently, and I live that life very differently. My purpose now is more about what I can do with my body than about what it looks like. Of course, that still comes into play, right? It's nice if you look healthy and look fit, but the reality is I care more about being able to, grab the dogs and go hike 3 miles up a mountain.
Yeah. I find most of the stuff that motivates us at the beginning, we end up getting accidentally when we stop focusing on it.
Yeah, that's very true. Very true.
All right. So what I found so fascinating about the trauma work and the polyvagal theory is that it explained why people who were motivated, who in the whole had self-efficacy, like, yes, I can definitely do this, who knew how to do it. They'd read all the books. They had watched all the videos. They attend the plant-based hoo-has and conferences and potlucks and veg fests. They have the skills. They've been practicing. They can post a beautiful Instagram picture of their, lovely acai bowl or air-fried potatoes. And they're very much, they might even be ethical vegans in their hearts, or, yes, interested in health, but still doing junk food a lot of the time. And they don't do it when they don't feel like it, and they can't understand it because they really, really want to.
Well, and even sometimes you can't, I would even add to that sometimes when you can understand it, because I can tell you that the times, even now at this point in my life, the times if I do slip up, that's what's involved.
Right.
If I have something that is not what I would have chosen, that wouldn't be the choice there. If I take a look at that, I was stressed, or I was feeling some of those same anxiety feelings, that came up when I was having all those panic attacks. And it's like, oh, well, if I eat this Lara bar right now, it's going to calm me down, or whatever that is.
Yeah.
So that's even now with, feeling like I have that ability and that identity, and on a general day-to-day basis, and normally throughout most of my life, that consistency. But the percentage of time when I slip up, it's related to that anxiety.
Right. And just, to give people a really, really too brief explanation, I kind of start with the word neuroception, which I think is Peter Levine's word. So we have perception with our eyes, our ears, our tongue, our fingers, that we can sort of sense the world around us, but our neurology, our nervous system also senses the world around us, and it's constantly telling us, are we safe? So it's sort of interpreting all of the other senses to give us a sense of, are we safe in this moment? And if we're safe, then the best thing we can do is either to rest or to engage socially. Right, those are the things that will increase our chance of survival. So, like go gather food, and which is usually done. If you're hunting, it's in a group. If you're gathering, it's a social thing. You don't wander off alone. And so, also to make social connections with your tribe, so that there's reciprocity if there needs to be. So you're not a loner. And when we feel unsafe, like there's a saber-toothed tiger stalking us, then we move into either fight or flight, or like you did after your accident, into what Peter Levine calls fold, which is if you tried to flee, right? You couldn't fight the engine fire, but you could flee. That would have been a good move, right? To get out of the car. Yep. And
that was the goal.
You were prevented from doing so by the stuck seatbelt, and as a result, that impulse was thwarted. And when our fight or flight impulse is thwarted and we feel like we are in mortal danger, the only thing we have left to do is to play dead. Essentially, right? And we see lots of animals do that, and we have the same circuitry to kind of go into, and we don't do it necessarily to that extreme, but metaphorically and actually, we can play dead. We can reduce our movements greatly, reduce our internal access to our energy, numb out numbing out is a really good strategy if you're about to be painfully killed, right? Because you might go into shock and your predator will get bored and leave and you might survive. So when it gets stuck like that, your neurology, your neuroception never releases never lets go of that message. We are in mortal danger. And so now everything you see becomes filtered through that. So sitting in a movie seat is mortal danger. And this is my big beef with cognitive behavioral therapy, is that we are trying to reason with people about their dysfunctional thoughts. And how much fun is it for someone to reason with you that sitting in a movie theater shouldn't trigger dysfunctional thoughts? When like, I mean, did people try to do that, or did you come across like, oh, I shouldn't think this?
Well, I don't know that I necessarily did in the movie theater situation, but in a lot of similar situations like that, yes. I mean, it was very like, hey, this is common. This is just logical. There's nothing wrong here. You're in a perfectly safe situation. You're sitting in a chair wherever you are, but that's just not how our brains are wired, and that's, I think, where what you're talking about here, Howard, becomes so important. Is just the understanding that the way we're wired, once you've got that feeling, that lack of safety, then anything that is at all similar or reminiscent to that situation can be enough to trigger that feeling, that lack of safety.
Right. And it's not a conscious decision.
Right. Yes.
And so if your body feels like, honestly believes it is in mortal danger or in imminent danger, like it's around the corner, then the things to do are to eat, right? Because you're about to be attacked. You might be laid up for a while. Let's get as many calories in us as possible. So there's a direct trigger to eat the worst possible foods, right? To focus on very, very short-term needs rather than long-term needs. And we literally have no say in the matter. And so trying to talk to someone to coach them out of this is very often like, imagine you're a driving instructor and your client is sitting in the back seat of the car and you keep telling them to step on the accelerator and you keep telling them to turn the steering wheel, and you're getting more and more frustrated and they're getting more and more frustrated because they can't do it.
I don't have a steering wheel.
Yeah. I know theoretically there's one, I just don't know how to reach it.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of the key, right? Is to get, to have the abilities then to steer that car,
right,
or to reach that accelerator. And if we don't have that, then all of the and again, that's where having all the knowledge of whether it's that you're safe or that you're okay, whatever that knowledge is, having all the knowledge in the world doesn't do you any good if you don't have the ability that is necessary to implement it.
Right, and that's a key piece of our coach training that I think is especially around food, exercise, sleep, stress is utterly key. But honestly, I also coach business leaders, and anytime there's a fear of doing something, and usually what stops us is some sort of fear. Right? Like, okay, I'm in the break room. I don't want to be seen being different than everyone else, or I don't know how to have this conversation with my spouse about I don't want to go out and drink on Friday nights anymore. I'm afraid of what will happen. And so anytime we feel afraid, it triggers that neurological trauma. And all of us have trauma, whether it's as acute and visually arresting as yours, or whether it was just the way we were treated as kids, time and time again, maybe being belittled or ignored or told to be quiet or high expectations or whatever it is, because none of us is perfect and none of us has perfect parents. And so to be able to go into and understand the neurology, the somatics of that fear state, and work through it with meditation, with body movement, with breath, with using physical exercise in a positive way, This is crucial to anyone who wants to make lasting change.
Oh yeah, for sure.
All right, are we wrapped up? Anything you wanted to talk about that we've skipped so far?
I kind of just did want to make one comment, because you mentioned, you talk about the fear and about how we've all got a lot of these situations. It's amazing how much this really comes up in the work that we do. When we're coaching people, this is not, this fear stuff, this polyvagal stuff, all of this meditation, everything like that's not just for people that have a very specific trauma like mine. Everybody really has some sort of fear in their life. And I mean, we end up talking about these things all the time as we're coaching people. It's a very, it may not be something that you automatically think of as, important to working with someone who wants to lose weight or wants to regain their health in that sense. But it's something that we see every week as we coach. So,
right, it's the human condition.
It is. So, I just wanted to mention that.
Right, and we don't work with it as therapists, right? So
right.
We understand it. We help our clients understand it, and then it's all about taking simple actions. Right, doing breathing exercises, doing the basic eye exercise that we teach, sitting down for a 30-second meditation and noticing how your body feels. So we're not. It may start to sound theoretical, but we end up like healing from it and moving forward through very practical application of stuff to do.
And that, I mean, and it's just kind of funny when you think about that, like that practical application of some of that stuff was really, the part that was so significant in making change for me from this huge amount of anxiety. And so not only can it be helpful if somebody just, is dealing with some of this a little bit here and there as they go through their journey, but I mean, that's kind of really the difference in methodology that helped so much for me when I, felt so agoraphobic that I could hardly leave my home.
Right.
So.
Yep. All right. Well, let's close it there because I don't have that much time to publish this, and I'm already a day late. I'm feeling like I've missed my own self assigned deadline. If people want to know more about the coach training, so if you're listening to this today or the next few days from publication, today's May 1st, 2019, we're starting next week. And so if you go to WellStartCoach.com, you can read all about the program. And down at the bottom, you can sign up for an enrollment interview. And during that time, we will talk to you about whether it would be a good fit, whether you want to do it, whether we think you'd be appropriate for the cohort, and then we would take it from there. Kevin, I mean, we got a lot of your story. We truncated some of it in the interest of talking about coaching, but I encourage everyone to follow you on Instagram, Kevin Eats Plants, and Kevin is one of our star coaches and a sort of the backbone of our communication system with clients, and anyone who wants to get better at coaching. Either you're already a coach and you want to achieve reliable results, whereas before it's been sort of hit or miss, or if you want to become a health coach, or you just want this skill, like the way some people can change the oil and air filter in their car, just sort of to help friends and family or to help yourself. This is all, right. This is all the sorts of people that we've had go through the previous 2 coach trainings, and we're expecting this one is going to be the most powerful one yet, because we keep learning and improving over time.
Yeah, we do, and I just want to say that's kind of with the help and the experience of the folks that have gone through it with us previously. Part of what we do is we continue to have ongoing, calls and discussions month after month with the folks that have wrapped up already. So, anything that we continue to learn or maybe that they experience, we still share on a monthly basis and continue the learning process.
Right on. All right, so I hope to see some of our listeners reach out. This is, it's powerful work that we've seen ripple out into the world. A lot of our coaches come back and tell us, their success stories of working with clients, and oh my gosh, even like family members start to change when we adopt these skills and habit patterns in terms of interacting and communicating with them. So we just want this to go out into the world and really change the perception of health coaching to something that actually works.
Yeah.
Right. So, Kevin, thank you so much for taking the time, for doing it on such short notice. And I'll talk to you.
We're finally able to do it.
Yeah, let's do it again. Maybe we should start doing coaching Clatch podcasts where we can also share stories with everyone.
That sounds great to me.
All right, Kevin, thank you so much. I'll talk to you again soon, and thank you, everybody,
All right, I
for
hope
listening.
that
That was a helpful conversation for you, whether you are a changer or a changee. And again, if you're interested in finding out more about the coach training program, go to WellStartCoach.com. While ideally everyone would be onboarded and ready to hit the ground running on May 6th, if you're interested and it takes a little bit longer to get you an interview and get you enrolled, it's not a big deal. One day I'll get my act together and have all this done, weeks in advance. But until then, we're going to just keep things moving on the fly. All right. If you enjoyed this episode of the Plant Yourself podcast and you'd like to support the mission of the show, you can subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. That's absolutely free. You can become a patron. You can share this with other people. All of those are really good things. You can also just drop me a note and let me know what you think of the podcast. Best way to do that, of course, is publicly on a review site. But if you just want to email me privately, I love hearing from you. I'll try to reply. It's hj@plantyourself.com. Be sure to check out the show notes for today's episode with links to the stuff we talked about at plantyourself.com/320. That's where you'll find that PDF of the 7 levels of habit change that we talked about throughout the second half of the conversation. If you're new to this show, you can catch up on hundreds of archived episodes over at plantyourself.com. In garden news, I came home from a run this morning and found 4 beautiful asparagus stalks on the kitchen counter. So I think we're fully into mid-spring. Apparently the last of the winter greens went into a smoothie yesterday when I wasn't home. But there's a lot of starts in the greenhouse, and hopefully we'll have some more kale and collards and chard before the weather gets too hot here. In running news, I did hills today. Did 13 reps up the hill. I found my neighbor Krista running, and we tackled the hills together. It was 5-minute-long sprints up the hill, followed by 8 45-second sprints. It's a workout that Josh gave me, and I keep on my watch. And I haven't done that in a long time. It felt really good to feel that bad at the top of the hill 13 times. Okay, some quick gratitudes. Thanks to Will Ridenauer for allowing me to use Sabali Dawn, the Dance of Peace, as the theme music for Plant Yourself. Check out willridenauer.com for more. And of course, thanks to all you Plant Yourself podcast patrons. Kim Harrison, Lynn McClellan, Anthony Disson, Brittany Porter, Dominic Maurer, Barbara Whitney, Tammy Black, Amy Good, Amanda Hatherley, Mary Jane Wheeler, Ellen Kennelly, Melissa Cobb, Rachel Burns, Christine Nielsen, Tina Scharf, Tina Ahern, Jen Volkanovsky, David Bizek, I'm going to try that again. Tina Ahern, Jen Volkanovsky, David Bizek, Mysterious, Michelle X, Elspeth Feldman, Victoria Dolomanova, Leah Stoller, Alan Christensen, Colleen Peck, Michelle Andrew, Josina, Julianne Roland, Stu Dolnick, Sarah Durkis, Rhymes with Circus, Kelly Cameron, Wayne Patterson, Leanne Peterson, Janet Selby, Claire Adams, Tom Francis, Jeanette Bennett, Gila, Sarah David Donahue, Blair Cyber, Duro Naviza, Jew and Carol Argentati. Jody Friesner, Ruth Ann Thunderberg, Misha Rosen, Michael Warbeck, the equally mysterious Tracy Z, Alicia Lemons, Rebecca Hughes, Val Linneman, Brimes with Cinnamon, Nika Harper, Stephanie Holmes, Martha Bergner, Nicole Ramsey, Susan Ahmad, Molly Levine, the inscrutable Harry R., Susan Lamberty, the Panda Vegan, Craig Kovic, Adam Sharp, Karen Berry, Heather Morgan, Lashley Corcoran, Kelly Machia, Deanne Norton, Bonnie Lynch of Plant Happy Oregon, Sabina Kurtzels, Nigel Davies, Marion Blum, Teresa Coble, Shell Rootless, Julian Watkins, Breed O'Connell, Brian Sheridan, Shannon Hirschman, Kate Rolls, Linda Ayat, Julie Langholm, Hedda Gardy, Zatuzan Wakani, Hainline, Aaron Greer, Alicia. All right, another breath. Alicia Davis, Aviva Lael, Heather O'Connor, Carolyn Jensen, Sherry Orlikoski of Plant Powered for Health, Karen Smith, Scott Morani, Karen and Joe Crabtree, Tanya Lewis, Kirby Burton, Teresa Carell, Kevin McCauley, Elizabeth Rothschild, Kelly Baker, Miracle, Ann Jesse, Cheryl Dwyer, Jenny Hazelton, Valerie Peltier, Peter W. Evans, Colleen Harrison, Justine Divitt, Joshua Summermeyer, Dennis Bird, Darby Kelly, Lori Fanny, Linnea Lundquist, Valerie Hummel, Deb Casilla, Emily Iconelli, Levy Wallach, Rosamund McAtee, Dan Picorni, Stephen Leenan, Patty DiMartino, Mike and Donna Kartz, Deanne Bishop, Bilberry Elf, Gunter Schmidt, Marjorie Lewis, Kelly Molden, Tricia Adams, Ian Kramer, Nancy Sheldon, Lindsay Bayshore, Gunmarit Hagen, Tracy Gullidge, Laura Heaton, and Meg from Mama Says for your generous support of the podcast. That's it for this week. As always, be well, my friends.